This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. I would like to speak about a subject that is very relevant to the Haggadah Shel Pesach and the entire experience of how we should approach the Haggadah and how we should imagine and view ourselves, not just as participants and recounting the story, but actually reliving the experience. Let's begin with a very interesting question. This is a question that the Rishonim discuss, and that is, we know that typically on, let's say, Purim or Chanukah, we make a bracha, Sha'asa Nisim La'avoiseinu B'yamim Ha'im B'zman Hazeh, that the Rebbe Shem performed miracles for our forefathers in those days, at this time. And conspicuously absent from the Seder, we make so many brachas, we have so many statements that we say, but conspicuously absent from the Haggadah is the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim La'avoiseinu. Why don't we make the bracha Sha'asa Nisim La'avoiseinu? Where is it? What happened to it? Asks the Sofer Orois HaPesach of Reb Shlomo Warman. And the truth is, this question is already asked by the Torah in Siman Taf Ayin Gimel. And the Torah answers that Sha'asa Nisim does appear in the Haggadah. We do make the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim. The bracha of Asher Ge'alanu covers the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim. We're going to say a bracha that Hashem redeemed us. That incorporates the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim La'avoiseinu. But there is a striking contrast between the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim La'avoiseinu and Asher Ge'alanu. Sha'asa Nisim La'avoiseinu, we're saying God performed a miracle to our forefathers. Asher Ge'alanu is, on the other hand, God redeemed us. Why do we have this contrast between Sha'asa Nisim La'avoiseinu and Asher Ge'alanu? Okay, another important question. We know there are many mitzvahs that we perform the night of Pesach. However, there's one mitzvah, which is one of the two mitzvahs that are still d'oraisa. We know the night of Pesach, we still perform two mitzvahs that are d'oraisa. Number one, achilas matzah. Matzah is d'oraisa. We make a bracha on achilas matzah. However, there's another mitzvah, which is also d'oraisa, and we don't make a bracha on it. And that mitzvah is Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. Why do we not make a bracha on the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim? Comes the Shiboile Haleket, and he gives two answers. The first answer is a real whopper, and we're not going to get into it too much tonight, or at all tonight, but the Shiboile Haleket says, what, a bracha on Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim? We already made a bracha on Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. The Birchos Kriya Shema cover the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. What an interesting answer. The Birchos Kriya Shema covers Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. But then the Shiboile Haleket says so interestingly, we do make a bracha on Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. The bracha Asher Ge'alanu that we make on the second kais, that covers the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. Comes the Chasam Sofer, in the Drasha is Chasam Sofer, and the Chasam Sofer on Pesach year Tav Kuf Pei. Chasam Sofer asks, we know there's a klal in the Gemara in Pesachim, Kol ha-mitzvahs mevarchin oisan over l'asiyasan. All mitzvahs, we make a blessing on them before the performance of the mitzvah. So why is it when it comes to the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, we don't make a bracha on the beginning of the mitzvah, and instead we wait till the end? Instead, we go through the whole Sipur, the whole account, the whole story, the whole Manishtana, the whole Metchila Ovdei Avodah Zara, all the Makos, all the Dayenus, and then we make a bracha. You're supposed to make a bracha before. So if I could digress for a moment, I'm going to make a small commercial. I'm reading now teaching now from the Sofer Magid Arakia. This is a humble Sofer that just came out on the Yom Tov of Pesach. It's available in all stores. The problem is all the stores are closed now. So there's actually a very convenient way to order the Sofer. And if you're interested, you'd be doing me a personal favor because I have boxes in my garage, and I really want to get the Sofer out. So if you go to TorahAnytime.com, go to speakers, go to Glatstein, and by the bio, there's a link, and you can order the Sofer and have it delivered to your house. In 1 or 2 days, you'll have it by Pesach for a very discounted price. So again, go to TorahAnytime.com, and there's a special link, free delivery to anywhere in the United States. So, very interesting, the Chasam Sofer asks, This is a violation of the principle of all mitzvahs. We're mevarich on them, oiver la'asiyasam. Okay, we come to another episode in the Haggadah. And the Haggadah tells us the story about Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah and Rabbi Akifa and Rabbi Tarfain. And what are they doing? They're reclining where? They're reclining in Bnei Brak. And what are they doing? They're speaking about Yetzias Mitzrayim the entire night. Kol oisei halayla, until the Talmidim come, and they have to remind them, Rabbeim, higiu zman kriya shema shel shachris. Here's the question. Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah, what in the world is he doing? This question is raised by Shal Shechuvas Mishkan Yaakov. Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah, we know there's a famous machlokes in Masechta Brachos. When is the last time to bring the Korban Pesach? So Rabbi Kiva says you could bring it the whole night. But Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah says, no, you have until Chatzos to bring the Korban Pesach. Oh, until Chatzos to bring the Korban Pesach? Really? Well, if you have only until Chatzos to bring the Korban Pesach, then matzah, which is compared to the Korban Pesach, you have until Chatzos. And if matzah you have until Chatzos, then guess when you have until to discuss Yetzias Mitzrayim, also until Chatzos. Because the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is compared to matzah. Because we say, we know the mitzvah of matzah is only applicable, is only noigeya, can only be fulfilled when the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim can only be fulfilled when you can be mekayim the mitzvah of matzah. So Herzachayim, listen up. Bishlam, according to Rabbi Akiva, that you could eat the Korban Pesach the whole night, and then matzah is the whole night. So Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is the whole night. So we understand what Rabbi Akiva is doing. But Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah, who holds the Korban Pesach, can only be brought till Chatzos. So matzah can only be until Chatzos. So Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is only till Chatzos. So what's the man doing speaking about Yetzias Mitzrayim the whole night? The mitzvah is over. It's like a guy shaking a lulav on Tisha B'Av. It's like a guy, I don't know what. It's like a guy sitting in a sukkah on Lag BaOmer. The mitzvah's over. I know you like the mitzvah, but there's a yesh zman lakoil. So why would Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah fulfill a mitzvah when the time is up? That's the question of Shas Chuvas Mishkan Yaakov. Comes the Abarbanel, and Abarbanel asks another very interesting question. There's something called Simchas Yom Tov. Now, I don't know about you, but I like to sleep. For me, it's a simcha to sleep. So these rabbis, we know they love to learn. So let them talk about it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, the whole night. What happened to sleep? Why are they torturing themselves? Why are they giving up on their Simchas Yom Tov? Another observation. In the Haggadah, we say, Lefikach, Anachnu Chayavim Lahoidos, Lahallel, L'Shabeach, L'Far, L'Roimim, L'Hader, L'Natseach. L'Misha Asalanu, L'Avesen's Kol Nisim Ha'elu, Etzir Me'abdos L'Cheros, and we end off, V'nemar L'Fanav Shira Chadasha. V'nemar means, and they, the Bnei Yisrael, said before you a new song, and they did. The Bnei Yisrael sang a new song. They sang Hallel for the very, very first time in history. Says the Magen Avram, the proper vocalization of the world. V'nemar is V'nemar. And yet, in almost every Haggadah, you'll see we pronounce the word V'noimar. We will say before you a new song. We will say before you a new song. It's not a new song anymore. Hallel is not a new song. It's as old as the hills. Why do we not follow the direction of the Magen Avram? The Magen Avram says the correct vocalization and pronunciation is V'ne'emar. And they said, and it's true, for the Bnei Yisrael in Mitzrayim, it was a new song. But for us to say, we will say a new song, this is not a new song. Good kasha, Reb Sender, right? Yeah. Reb Sender says thumbs up. It's a gavaldige kasha. Why don't we follow the advice of the Magen Avram? Another important question. There's a thera in the Haggadah. You see, in the beginning of the Haggadah, we say that the reasoning of matzah is halach ma'anya di'achala v'san ba'arad mitzvah. This is the poor man's bread that our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. We say the reason for matzah is because we were afflicted in Egypt. We didn't have great food. We didn't have luxurious cuisine. We ate the poor man's bread. Matzah represents slavery. And here's the problem. We get to the end of the Haggadah, and Ram Gamliel says, you better say that the reason for matzah is to recall and to recount that God took us out of Egypt, b'chipazayin, in a snap, in a flash. So here at the end of the Haggadah, we're saying the reasoning for matzah is to remember the cheros. So make up your mind. Is matzah to remember the bitterness, or is matzah to remember the freedom? It's a stira. What is the purpose of the matzah? What is the reason for matzah? Another question, another amazing question. We all know on the last day of Pesach, we don't say Hallel Shalem. The reason is, says the Torah, that we're not goymer Hallel. The Beis Yosef explains from the Shibbolei Haleket that since the Mitzrim had a downfall, since they suffered and they drowned, b'nafal oivecha al tismach, and therefore we do not say Hallel Shalem on the last days of Pesach, and therefore so that Chol HaMoed is not celebrated in a greater fashion than the last day of Pesach, we don't say Hallel Shalem on Chol HaMoed either. So now the question is, if you can't sing when our enemies have a downfall, how are we allowed to say Hallel Shalem on the first days of Pesach? The Egyptians died in a much greater fashion on the first days of Pesach. Ein bayis asher ein shameis. Every firstborn person dropped dead. So how can we say Hallel when the Egyptians are dropping like flies? We say in the Haggadah, and we spoke about this last night, and we're going to elaborate further. We say in the Haggadah in every single generation, one is obligated to imagine themselves as if they themselves left Mitzrayim. However, the Rambam, in his Ha'ataka, when the Rambam brings this part of the Haggadah, the Rambam has one nuance of difference. The Rambam says, not chayv adam lirois es atzmai, not a person is obligated to see themselves, but chayv adam laharois es atzmai. A person is obligated to demonstrate. A person is obligated to act as if. A person is obligated to show himself. Now, that might be an advantage of this year's Seder. Ordinarily, you might have your brother-in-law at the table, you might have your sister-in-law on the table, and you may be a little ashamed or reserved to act out as if you personally left Egypt. But this year, no reservations. It's just you and your immediate family. So wear your emotions on your sleeves, act it out. This is what a wondrous opportunity. But the question is, why should we imagine something that never occurred? We don't have to imagine ourselves as if Haman was trying to eradicate us and God saved us. We don't have to imagine as if Antiochus tried to take away our service of God and God saved us. And the reason we don't have to imagine that is because these things never happened. We are never obligated to just imagine things that, for the fun of it, to imagine things that never occurred. Why then on Pesach do we have this obligation to imagine as if we ourselves left Egypt? Comes the Abarbanel. And Abarbanel writes in his Haggadah an amazing thing. Says the Abarbanel, you know why these great tzaddikim stayed up all night and they didn't go to sleep and they wiped away sleep from their eyes and they didn't have Simchas Yom Tov? Says the Abarbanel, they weren't actually fulfilling the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. But there's another dimension of the mitzvah, and that is the dimension of Chayev Adam leharois es atzmai ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. That aside from saying over the story, you need to act and you need to relive the experience and imagine the experience. And therefore, when the Jews actually left Egypt, the first half of the night, they were busy with their matzah, with their maror, and busy with the mitzvahs halayla. And the second half of the night, they didn't sleep all night, they were preparing to leave. And therefore, the best way to relive and reenact the story is to stay up all night and relive the story. So these Chachamim stayed up not only to fulfill the mitzvah of Sipur, but to fulfill the mitzvah of Chayev Adam leharois es atzmai ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Suggests Rav Neichai Zakobam Shlita and Rabbi Shlomo Warman Zechazak bracha. This would explain and answer up the question of the Mishkanos Yaakov. We asked earlier, why was Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah speaking about Yetzias Mitzrayim after Chatzos? For him, the mitzvah had already ceased at Chatzos. The answer is, suggests these Svarim, is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was not speaking about it to fulfill the mitzvah of Sipur. You see, there are two mitzvahs in that other thing. One mitzvah is to recount the event. One mitzvah is to relive the event. The mitzvah of Sipur ceases at Chatzos, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The mitzvah of reliving the experience, that ceases at Ein Lo Zman. Reliving an experience has no shiur, has no zman, until the morning. And therefore the Talmidim came and said, Higia Zman Kriyash Mashal Shachas. Comes the Chasam Sofer, and the Chasam Sofer says a wondrous thing. He says something so amazing. He says this obligation to relive the experience, not only does it encompass reliving that God actually took us out of Egypt, we're obligated to relive the entirety of the experience. Not only the freedom, but the bondage. And not only the bondage, but the precursor of the bondage. We need to relive. We need to relive as if we were serving idols, as if we were not even Yidden. We imagine ourselves as Goyim, so to speak. Says Chasam Sofer, that is why this is one time a year that we will break bread. We will be boitzeya, and we will not make a bracha. Every other Suda we break bread and we make hamotzi, not the night of the Seder. Yachatz, and there's no bracha. And the reason there's no bracha is how can we say Vitzivanu? Right now we are not even Am Yisrael, we are not even Jews. God has not commanded us anything yet. We're not even eligible to be commanded. Says Chasam Sofer, although the Gemara in Pesachim says a rule that a person is obligated to envision and imagine themselves as if they themselves left Egypt, there's one mitzvah that's the exception to the rule, and that is when a ger converts. When a ger converts, we tell the ger, go into the mikvah. So the ger says, oh, don't I have to make a bracha? We say, yeah, but you can't make the bracha before you go to the mikvah because you ain't a Jew yet. You're not Jewish yet. You can't say Vitzivanu. So we tell the ger, first dip and then bless. So too the night of the Seder. Like Gerim, we are not able to make the bracha in the beginning of the Seder. That is why we make the bracha at the end of the Seder. After reliving the experience, we relive worshiping idols, so to speak. We relive the freedom from bondage. We relive the spiritual and religious freedom. We are now Yidden. We are now Jews. We are now members of the chosen nation. We are now eligible to say Vitzivanu. We are now eligible to make a bracha, Ashar Ge'alanu. And yes, Hallel is as old as the hills. It's the oldest song in the world. So how could we say, Vin noimar lefanav shira chadasha, we will say a new song? This is not a new song. This is the oldest song in the world. How can we say, we will sing a new song? The answer is, because it is a new song. Because we are the first to sing it. Because we are reliving the experience as if we ourselves left Egypt, and therefore it is as if this is the first time Hallel has ever been said. So even though Magen Avraham says we should vocalize it, V'nemar, they said, because it was only a Shiur Chadasha for them, we are able to say V'noimar, we will say a new song, because in fact it is a new song. This is the very first time Hallel is being recited. Now, watch this. On Shvi Shel Pesach, we can't say Hallel Shalom. The Mitzvah drowned. You can't sing Shira when people are suffering. So how can we sing Hallel Shalom on the first days of Pesach? I have a question for you. If you're not allowed to sing Hallel and you can't sing when your enemies have a downfall, could someone tell me, how is it possible? How is it shayach that on Shvi Shel Pesach, what did the Jews do when they crossed the Yam Suf? What were they doing? Weeping for the dead Egyptians? They were singing Az Yashir. But I thought, B'nafai Oyvechal Tismach. I thought you're not allowed to sing when your enemy has a downfall. And the answer is, other people can't sing when your enemy has a downfall. But when you're the Baal Hanes, when the miracle is happening to you, what else could you do but sing, even when others are suffering? So yes, we don't say Hallel on Shvi Shel Pesach, but the Bnei Yisrael said Hallel on Shvi Shel Pesach, and since the Bnei Yisrael said Hallel because they were the Baal Hanes, so too, when it comes to the first days of Pesach, you know how we could say Hallel on the first days of Pesach? But wait a second, the Egyptians suffered. The answer is on the first day of Pesach, we are the Baal Hanes. The miracle happened to us because since Chayv Adam Liroy says Atzmai Kilo Yatsumi Mitzrayim, that a person is obligated to envision and imagine themselves as if they left Egypt, that means we are the Balanes. The miracle occurred to us. The miracle happened to us. And therefore we are entitled to say the Hallel the same way the Klal Yisrael said, Az Yashir on Shvi Shal Pesach. So here's the question of the night. And this I mentioned last night as well. From Gamliel Haya Omer, Kol Shloi Amar Shloisha Dvar Me'elu BePesach, Lo Yatzi Dei Chayvasai, Pesach Matzah Mara. Okay. Matzah and Mara. What an interesting order. Matzah and Mara. Is that the correct order? Matzah represents freedom. Matzah represents cheros. Mara is the bitterness, the bondage. What came first? The freedom or the bondage? The freedom or the slavery? First came the bitterness, then came the freedom. Wouldn't it be more logical? Wouldn't it be more reasonable? Marar and matzah? No. First comes matzah, and then comes marar. First eat the matzah, then eat the marar. Why do we do it backwards? After all, it's a Seder night. It's a night of order. This is not an order. This is a backward order. Well, comes the Baal Nesivois HaMishpat, the Sofer Masa Nisim, and he says a wondrous pshat. But first, let's ask another question. We asked earlier, why would we be obligated to imagine something that never occurred? We're the Am HaEmes. God is Chasam Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Emes. Why imagine something that never happened? And this is really one of the major keys of Leil Seder. If I were to ask you, what are we celebrating the night of the Seder? What are we commemorating? What are we happy about? So many people would say, well, things were really bad in Egypt. We suffered. They tortured our children. We worked day and night. We had no life. And God freed us. And now we're free people. That's the celebration of Pesach. And that is a grave and fundamental error. That is not the celebration of Pesach. That's a secondary afterthought. Even if we lived like kings in Egypt, even if we were living the good life in Egypt, we would still celebrate Pesach. You know why we celebrate Pesach? Pesach is a celebration that God redeemed us and took us to be His chosen nation. That we are going to be selected to accept the thera. We're going to be selected to go into Eretz Yisrael. We are going to be selected to get Olam Haba. We are the royal nation, the Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. That's the happiness of Pesach. Now, by the way, we still have to have Hakar Satoif because we weren't living it up in Mitzrayim. We weren't living the good life. Things were miserable in Egypt. And therefore, we'll never forget about the Marar, but only as an afterthought. If we were to eat the Marar first and then eat the matzah, we would mistakenly think that the freedom of Pesach is all about freedom from Marar. And that's a grave error. You missed the boat. Marar is an afterthought, even if there was no Marar. Even if we were living like kings. But to become the Amma Nivchar, to become Hashem's select and chosen and beloved nation, eligible for greatness, eligible for the thera, eligible for Olam Haba, eligible for Eretz Yisrael, that's worth it even if we were kings in Egypt. So first we eat the matzah, and we indicate it doesn't matter what our conditions were in Egypt. We are so ecstatic that the Rebbe Hashem selected us. And then we say, but don't forget about the fact that the Rebbe Hashem did take us out of a very bad situation. Now, listen carefully. Who did God select to be His chosen people? Who does God want to have the thera? Who does the Rebbe Hashem want? Who does the Rebbe Hashem want to have Olam Haba? Who does the Rebbe Hashem want to have Eretz Yisrael? Those 600,000 Jews, and we happen to be the beneficiaries? Or no, says the Nesivos. The Rebbe Hashem looked throughout history, and He looked at them, and He looked at you, and He looked at me, and He said, I want to give this entire people the thera. I want to give this entire people Eretz Yisrael. I want this entirety of a nation to be B'nai Olam Haba, B'nai Kel Chai, the Amma Nivchar. The Rebbe Hashem selected all of us. So as opposed to other miracles, Purim and Hanukkah, where our forefathers were saved, not us. And you're right, if He wouldn't have saved them, perhaps we wouldn't be here. So we're the lucky beneficiaries. But Yetzias Mitzrayim, if the main benefit of Yetzias Mitzrayim was God took us out of bitterness, then there would be absolutely no obligation to imagine you were in Egypt, because you weren't and you had no bitterness. But now that we're learning the main celebration of Pesach is recognizing and appreciating that we are the Am Hashem, then we are equal beneficiaries of this miracle. We are equal to the nation that left Egypt. And therefore, the reason we have to imagine ourselves as if we were in Egypt, to internalize that the great benefit and hatava that God bestowed on them, He bestowed on me and you equally. We are also the Am HaNivchar. We are also the Mekablei HaTorah. We are also the Bnei Eretz Yisrael and Bnei Olam Haba. And therefore, in order to feel this and integrate this, Chayiv Adam Lirois Es Atzmai Ki'ilu Hu Yatsa Mitzrayim. And this answers one more difficulty in the Haggadah. We say in the beginning of the Haggadah, Kol dichvin yeseh v'yechal, kol ditzrach yetze v'yifsach. Anyone hungry, come and eat. By the way, I'll tell you just a side question. Can we even say these words this year? Anyone hungry, come and eat. It's against the law, it's illegal, and it's against the halacha. We can't invite anyone to your house this year. How could you say, Kol dichvin yeseh v'yechal? There's a very nice shiur on that. Check out torahanytime.com. The amazing revelation of the kolboi. The kolboi has an astounding pshat in the halach ma'anya. But the pashut pshat in kol ditzrich yeseh v'yifsach, anyone who needs, come partake of the korban pesach. These words are so difficult because halach ma'anya was instituted after the churban, when there is no korban pesach. What are we telling people? Anyone who doesn't have a korban pesach, come over to my house and eat the korban pesach. These words were enacted when the temple was no longer. What do these words mean? But according to what we're saying, we could say so beautifully. Remember we asked in the beginning of the shiur, what's the reason for matzah? Is it to commemorate the bondage and the hard times and the bread of affliction of Egypt? Or is it to commemorate the freedom? And you know what the answer is? Yes! In the beginning of the Seder, we're imagining ourselves as if we're in Egypt. So we're in Egypt, we have those straps around our leg and they're beating us. And we have this matzah on our table and we ask, what's this matzah doing here? What is it all about? This is not the bread of freedom. We haven't been freed yet. We're still in Egypt. We're still slaves. And therefore we have to say, right now the reasoning of matzah is halach ma'anya di'achala v'san barad Mitzrayim. By the end of the Haggadah, we're free. We still have the matzah on our table. We ask, what are we eating with the matzah now? We're not poor men. We're not suffering in Egypt. We're free. Why do we eat the matzah now? Oh, now the reason for matzah is it's the bread of freedom. It depends where you are. When you're in Egypt, it's halach ma'anya di'achala v'san barad Mitzrayim. When you're out of Egypt, it's mishum shel hispik v'tzegel l'tzekes. Rabbi said it means halach ma'anya is imagining ourselves as if we're in Egypt. And therefore we turn to our friends and we say, Rabbi, we're in Egypt today. This is the night we're leaving. We just offered a korban pesach. Would you like to join me? Would you like to partake? This is not a statement for 2020. We are going back in a time machine and we are reliving and re-experiencing the monumental event of actually leaving Egypt. So this is a very important yesod and a very important principle. Number one, we are obligated and we are commanded not only to relive the experience, but to actually act out the experience and to show, to demonstrate that we are leaving Mitzrayim tonight. But furthermore, the reason we're obligated to do that, the reason we have this great obligation is because we, in fact, are the equal beneficiaries of this great miracle and this great hatava, as were the people who left. And therefore, the Rebbe Shem has given us this special opportunity. And friends, if we have a commandment to imagine ourselves as if we were in Egypt, that means we have the capacity and the ability to really be there and really relive it and feel it and teach it to our children. And may, in the schus of fulfilling the mitzvahs of the Seder properly, may we be zoicha to the great promise of Micha Hanavi, Ki meitzeischa me'aretz Mitzrayim arenu neflais. Because all the miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim were only the pre-enactment, were the dress rehearsal for the incredible miracles that are in store for us, for our families, for our children, that we will be zoicha to see with our own eyes. the tremendous nisim and aflois that Rebbe Shalom will perform for us when He takes us out of this galus. May we be zoicha l'shana haba v'yishalayim habnuya. Wishing everyone a chag kosher v'sameach, bracha v'hatzlacha, Hashem yishmerecha u'shmar tzeischa uvayecha me'ata v'yadolam. Shkoyach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.